Welcome to another edition of Jews on Film. My name is Daniel Zana. I'm a video editor and documentary filmmaker and still a Jew. With me, as always, is my co-host, Harry Ottensauser. Hi, Harry.
Hey, everyone. As Daniel mentioned, I'm Harry. I am a Jewish podcaster or a podcasting Jew, depending on your preference. And I am delighted to be joined by you and two guests that we have with us this week.
Absolutely. We are joined by Yechiel Hoffman and Jodi Berman of the Two Movie Jews podcast. Yechiel, Jodi, welcome to the podcast. Hi.
Thank you. Hi. We're so excited to be here.
Thanks, Daniel. Danny, Harry. That's great.
Yeah, we're excited to have you. Today, we'll be talking about Quentin Tarantino's film Inglourious Basterds. Yechiel, you picked this movie. Why did you do that? Why'd you pick this film?
Well, I think first it comes from the fact that like my entire love for film, really hit its apex when I saw Pulp Fiction. So like Quentin Tarantino is so much a part of my love of film and cinema. I went to work for a video store hoping that would translate to Quentin Tarantino's career in cinema. That didn't happen. And when I'm considering like the movies I love, that also like in that Venn diagram of movies that are Jewy, like Tarantino and like Nazi revenge fantasy films, like there's Inglourious Basterds. It's right there. And what movie could help me challenge myself into thinking, about what makes a movie Jewish? And, it's also just a great movie.
And Jodi, as you are someone who did not pick the film, I wanted to ask you a different question slightly. What was your experience growing up with Jewish film?
So I have a dad who is obsessed with all movies. And, when I was 5, we were allowed to watch R-rated movies as long as they were going to be good movies. There was just, and particularly if it's funny, it's funny. So early memories of The Frisco Kid, and I think I could repeat the entire Mel Brooks canon, seeing, of course, everything is through a modern lens, but at the time, seeing Native Americans speak in Yiddish in Blazing Saddles and the whole Mel Brooks canon and History of the World Part 1 and you name it, if it was funny, my dad was going to let us watch it. So I grew up anytime there was anything remotely Jewy. I mean, even Hester Street, which obviously I hope you can tell by the, not too many wrinkles on my face. I'm too young for Hester Street. But whenever it was on TV, my parents were like, we got to watch it because anytime Jews appeared, the Pickle Man, every Crossing Delancey, anytime a movie was Jewish, the Berman family was there.
Nice. And did you have a favorite among the ones you mentioned?
I think maybe Crossing Delancey, it's such a sweet, lovely film. And the Pickle, everybody loved the Pickle Man. Oh, you know what? Actually, I got to take it back. I think maybe Avalon was always our favorite. And we always quote that film, you cut the turkey without a bladder. I think all of those films, we can just, if you were to gather, not that you would ever do this because you're smart, gather the Bermans onto your podcast, we would just spend the whole time quoting films and especially Jewish films.
I was going to say we could have you on, or maybe we just have to hire you all as consultants for our future seasons. It feels like when we run out of movies, you'll just keep them coming. Because
you just call my dad. He'll take care. Gordon will take care of you.
That's good to know.
Yeah, definitely a lot of good selections that you just mentioned. I'm jotting them down as you speak. I'm sorry that we haven't covered a lot of these films, but to those listening, look out ahead. Maybe a sneak peek.
Future seasons.
Yeah. So Inglourious Basterds, what a film, where to start. I think the first place is to start at the beginning. We're talking about Quentin Tarantino at the time, not a Jew, still not a Jew, but now married to an Israeli.
Jew. Right.
Father of 2 Jews now.
That's right. So he's honorary, but I think, I don't know, just before we dive into it, any sort of Quentin Tarantino thoughts? I know for me, as someone who grew up in LA, I went to the silent movie theater like off of Fairfax, and it was a screening of like the Nosferatu film, like a silent film, and he was there. And so
Yeah.
like afterwards, he kind of like hung out and like, held court. He was in his like bleached blonde hair phase. And so he was just like talking to anybody about film. So that's my Tarantino memory and sort of my association.
That's an awesome memory, because
That is an awesome.
my only time getting to go see a movie with Quentin Tarantino was Hot Chicks by Rob Schneider
Okay.
at the Century City Mall. And and I remember like feeling a little like down, like I can't believe this is the movie Quentin Tarantino chose to see tonight. But that's the thing about Quentin Tarantino. His tastes are varied, and I think like that shows.
I was gonna say he might have really enjoyed it.
Yep.
He was laughing his ass off.
Oh my God. That's so disappointing. Sure. That's horrifying.
Yeah, I think Quentin Tarantino, I thought about that a lot at the top, because this is one of the more Jewish movies we've watched. And, you kind of do a double take, like, is he Jewish? Like, maybe I thought to myself, maybe I didn't realize that, and Googled it quickly, and, clearly not Jewish, but it does feel to me in line with a lot of the late stage Quentin Tarantino movies, where he'll just take on these very big subjects and these very, especially historical, like that sort of late stage Tarantino era, people say started with Bastards, where he starts taking on, revisionist history and starts rewriting kind of these big moments. So especially in the context of the later films, it doesn't feel to me like he was just appropriating this Jewish story so much as just choosing, the Jewish angle of this big World War II movie, which again, I love. I think he pulls off very successfully, not to spoil my thoughts about this movie. But for a minute there, I was a little bit like, should this have been a Jewish filmmaker? I guess not, because of his style. And, I'll get more into that as we go into the actual film.
I think that's a legitimate question about like, should it be, what would have happened if a Jewish filmmaker told the story, or is this really a Jewish story? And that's the content. But I hope we can also discuss whether or not Tarantino's approach to filmmaking is actually a Jewish approach to filmmaking, and the way he thinks about how he utilizes references to things, and the way he intercuts with things, and the way he's really like remaking somebody else's movie in this movie. And that a very Jewish approach to filmmaking.
I love that idea, and I love that conversation, and my mind is instantly thinking it's very sort of Talmudic and very, not to get a little bit deep, but very sort of like the commentary, the Tosfot, and the way that they kind of pull references and information from all across the Talmud. And I think you're really onto something there. And we love our little stretches there. Like if we interviewed Tarantino and asked him, were you thinking about the Tosfot when he told the story? Not necessarily, but I really like where you're going with that. And I definitely want to unpack, how Jewish is the actual filmmaking style, because Tarantino certainly has his own very unique filmmaking style.
Totally. Yeah. And I think like those sort of like voiceovers from Samuel L. Jackson, where he like features one of the characters and then he'll like tell their backstory, or he'll tell you what's up with nitrates film stock and how it's like super flammable and things like that. That to explain, Harry, when you say Tosfot, can you give us a little bit more, get into it a little bit, explain what that means?
Yeah. So I mentioned that they were a commentary, and they're one of the commentary. I don't have the exact era, but sort of 1,000 years ago kind of thing, commenting on the Talmud, on the Jewish Talmud.
Great.
And they and then they show up in a bunch of places, but one thing that they're known for, where a lot of commentaries, common figures who are commentating on the actual Talmud might focus on the isolated section that they're talking about. They were very famous for pulling in different references from all across the Talmud, and the Talmud itself is, over 2,700 pages. It's a very long text, and they were very learned in all of it. Like, again, to finish the analogy, like Tarantino sort of working in a video store and taking in all these different film references, and they used it to their advantage to kind of pull in, eclectic sources to kind of make a point about something, that they're reading based off of what a different sort of rabbi might have said, all the way in this other section. So, I think that there could be some sort of connection there, even if it might not have been intentional by the hands of Tarantino himself.
Nice.
Well, I think it's interesting you say that. Like now, like it's well known in Los Angeles that he owns a movie theater and he screens on film his own library. He's a librarian, essentially. He's a curator. He's also like every one of his films is essentially a referendum on other films, primarily from the 60s and 70s, which is where his passion area. And this film is no different. This film is actually there was an original film made called Inglourious Basterds, and Tarantino misspells Inglourious Basterds as a way of saying, I'm not making the exact same film over, but I'm acknowledging it enough. And it's almost like a text that has been copied and changed to create its uniqueness. And I think that is a part of the thematics of also this movie of like, are we really telling a true story, or are we really telling something that is a version of a true story that we need right now?
No question. No question. He's bastardizing the history, so to speak, a little bit by pushing it towards where he wants to go. And part of that sort of Jewish heroicism he works in, I think, is very intentional and, very Jewish. And again, all these conversations, I want to have them now, but when we go through the movie,
save it.
I know we'll get there.
Yeah.
I feel like we are already having them.
I know this is great. This is really great.
I mean, I read somewhere that I think the director of the first Inglourious Basterds makes a cameo in the film, which is kind of like a nice nod. But Harry,
as a German,
interesting. Okay,
as a German in full uniform, you're like, that's the part you want to play. Okay.
Yeah. Harry, can you do me a favor? Can you tell me what this film's about according to the IMDb summary?
Sure thing. I've got that ready to go. We got a nice one, a concise one, and here it goes.
All right.
In Nazi-occupied France during World War II, a plan to assassinate Nazi leaders by a group of Jewish U.S. soldiers coincides with the theater owner's vengeful plans for the same.
To the point.
The point. I think if you know the movie, it tells the whole story. And the only thing I wanted to mention is I've started noticing when explicitly Jewish movies use the word Jewish or just kind of pull themselves out of it and talk very vaguely about it. And I always appreciate when they acknowledge, sort of Jewish and calling them the sort of Jewish U.S. soldiers and not just the soldiers. That earns points for me, for whoever wrote this summary.
So let's get into it. But before we do, let's take a quick break and we'll be right back. Welcome back to Jews on Film. We're here with the folks from Two Movie Jews. We have Yechiel Hoffman and Jodi Berman. Welcome back. And we're here. We're going to get into the film. So the film starts out. We are in rural France. We start out in a nice sort of bucolic scene, and we have a French farmer and his lovely 3 daughters. We start off right away. We're introduced to Hans Landa, who is known as the Jew Hunter. And this 20-minute introductory scene is like, it sets the stage for the rest of the film. It's like a series of tense scenes. Like, that's how I would describe this movie. Just like tense scenes, not so much action. Like, I'll save that for later, but I wanted to get your thoughts on the opening scene, the switching of, dialogue from English to German to French, the pipes, the whole thing. Let's get some thoughts on that.
So interesting because, when even in Mel Brooks films, right? At the beginning of To Be or Not to Be, they start off in Polish and then they move to English sort of as a device. Like, we're not going to watch a whole Polish film. So I had forgotten about the change of language in this opening scene. So I sort of assumed that Tarantino was using it as a device, right? Like, so exhausted Americans who can't stand subtitles don't have to sit and read, because God forbid they should have to read while they're watching a movie.
Right.
But then there's this revelation that Christoph Waltz's character has switched to English because he knows there are Jews who don't speak English underneath, right? Oof. So you think it's just a device. I mean, I just thought this was so brilliant because I thought it was like a device in any other movie when they're like, let's switch to English so you don't have to sit and listen to us speak French. But it wasn't. It was actually very intentional and had a purpose relevant to the context of the plot. I just think, wow, it's so brilliant. It's so brilliant.
He's good at his job. They call him the Jew Hunter for a reason,
Yeah, right. He speaks all the languages.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, first of all, I'm happy you point that out because I don't know the sequence of the episodes when they're going to come out, but we just recorded an episode where we talked about it. It's actually another Holocaust film where they're doing English in like the concentration camps. And we were wondering, like, that's just like, it's a trick for the American audience. It's to make it more palatable, but they would never have been speaking English. And I'm happy you point out just how accurate and grounded it was, because I think the whole movie, obviously there's a lot of historical inaccuracies, but
a little bit.
there's definitely a respect for sort of the time and place and era, and I think that they stick with that. But secondly, just to the point of the way that scene builds, and obviously rewatching this movie, I had seen it before, but I watched it again ahead of this podcast, and that Shoshana and her family and the Dreyfuses are underneath the floorboards, and they're just kind of listening in. But the first time you watch it, you just don't know what's going on, and you're a little bit pulled in by this very sort of charming and eerily scary, Nazi figure. And he's like the center of the movie. And I read, recently that Tarantino considered not actually doing the movie because he thought he had written a part that was sort of like uncastable because this guy had to be, very sort of scary and compelling and charismatic. And, just I'll say it at the top, Christoph Waltz is amazing in this movie. He wins an Oscar for it, for good reason.
Yeah.
But just like the way that scene develops and it puts in that sort of genuine fear when there's this like nod to the floor and you kind of feel it change. And, already it's starting with, it's not like getting carried away with this, it's not making a sympathetic Nazi movie. It's not making this, whatever. It's giving you the stakes right away. And I think without that scene, because, we kind of fast forward in time a little bit after that, you don't have the same emotional gravity that you need to follow Shoshana's character, in her big revenge plot. And it's just really good seeding for, the revenge that she ultimately takes.
I think it's also like, first of all, it's the only Jew hunting scene we see really in the movie. Like after this point, Landa's head of security, kind of. He's not really in Jew hunting mode, but he creates the threat. And I'll say the threat is interestingly set up in multiple ways. One is, it's not really clear this guy hates Jews. He is doing his job. And that's an important point that gets played out, especially towards the end of the movie. He's a professional, and he uses all the skills he has to do his job extremely well. To the point where he even gets the person his adversary in the scene to basically acquiesce to him and do his job for him. The second thing I'll say, which is remarkable, is for a movie, and I'm sure we'll talk about it, that is violent to a gratuitous degree at times. The greatest threat in this movie is not violence. Like that scene sets up that the greatest suspense and tension you're going to feel in this movie is not because of violence. It's because of the way that we can situate people in a space together and use pacing. The violence is almost the most comical thing in the movie, not the most.
Totally. Yeah.
And just the last thing I'll say, which is like the most interesting part of that whole scene, is like we talked about, is you don't realize how long it is till it's over. Like nobody believes in the 20-minute opening sequence, and then it's done, and she's running to that field, and you realize you're starting the movie, and you're like, what just happened here? Like, what is this movie about? And you don't even know anymore. And that's amazing that he was able to do that and stretches so long in that sequence.
I think those were all really great points. And I wanted to jump on your second point just about how the violence, obviously, or the tension is not born out of violence. It's really born out of discovery. And, one thing we're assessing this as a sort of Jewish film, and especially even a Holocaust film, which I wouldn't argue it's so much a Holocaust film as much as it's almost a World War II film. Yeah. But I think the only character that we really see who is a Jew in hiding, throughout the entire thing, because the bastards aren't really hiding. Like, obviously they're trying to be discreet, but everyone knows that they're proud of their nicknames, the Bear Jew and like these big Jews.
Short Jew.
Like, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Like Shoshana is really the only one who is explicitly like a Jew in hiding, and just the way that they establish that with that first scene is really critical for the rest of the film. It's why the scene where they're eating pastries, when she runs into Hans Landa much later in the film and they're eating pastries together, is one of the most suspenseful scenes in the entire film. And I think it's amazing that even though he's doing a film that really does to me feel more like a World War II film, and acknowledges obviously Jews, but doesn't really center itself on the Jewish themes of just sort of hiding and what that means. I was very relieved that he had this one character that you really get to experience it, and I think he ramps up the tension around her character in what felt to me like an appropriate way, without being too, I think, over the top as a way you can get sometimes when, like we discussed in another episode, you get a little too cinematic with Holocaust films. I think it's the perfect balance of just that real tension of discovery without getting too much into the details of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So go ahead.
I was going to say, we never see concentration camps. The movie takes place entirely in France, not any of the other parts of Europe. You're talking about the hiding that Shoshana does. Shoshana becomes Shoshana's in hiding when the movie starts and runs away. Oh, in the open, so far in the open, it's unbelievable. She doesn't get shot, and when she escapes, she immediately transforms into a different person. She's on a different name. She's not hiding anymore. She's out in the open. She's standing on the streets. So I think the question of what does it mean to be hiding, and what does it mean to be hiding your Jewishness is a big part of the play here. But you're right. I kept on thinking that opening scene could have been in any Western. It could have been the bad guys trying to hunt down the good guys who have to be hiding. There was nothing essentially the Holocaust in that scene.
Yeah, absolutely.
Outside of the costuming.
And so what, as Yechiel mentioned, after this very, very tense scene, Hans Landa calls in his men. They put on a charade to make the people underneath the floorboards seem like everything's okay. But then Shoshana Dreyfus's family is murdered and she runs away. And the last thing we hear in that scene is Hans Landa say, "Au revoir, Shoshana!" And then after Shoshana escapes, we are introduced to the platoon of the Inglourious Basterds, who is headed up by Aldo Rain, is known as Aldo the Apache, played by Brad Pitt. And so he has his brigade of soldiers, some of them played by, some of them who are Jewish, some of them who are Germans who have defected to his side. And we get a really nice introduction to Stieglitz. Like we kind of mentioned before, Samuel L. Jackson kind of tells his very graphic backstory in an interesting way. But I thought it was like a very Tarantino way to kind of incorporate flashbacks, which is one of his trademarks. We get introduced.
It's great because it's like we're first shown like Hitler talking about the bastards, and then they kind of jump into the intro bastard scene. So you could almost call that like a flashback within the scene. And then you get the Stieglitz thing, which in my mind, I read it as a sort of flashback in a flashback. I was trying to keep track of all the layers that were going on there. Almost
like Inception, like, in a dream within a dream kind of thing.
Exactly.
Brad Pitt gives a great speech. I mean, his accent is like comically bad, I think.
My name is Lieutenant Aldo Rain, and I'm putting together a special team, and I need me 8 soldiers. 8 Jewish American soldiers.
I mean, I'm not talking about his Italian accent, which we'll find out about later. But, we get introduced to all the different folks. We find out about the Bear Jew as well. Is this the point where we are introduced to the Bear Jew? Played by Eli Roth, director of horror films and other things like that. And any thoughts on the Bastards as we get introduced to them?
I just think, to Harry's point about the way the storytelling is done here, where it's almost like 3 layers of storytelling to introduce us, is over thematically making something very clear about Tarantino's approach to this movie, which is everything is about storytelling. Somebody's telling a story about somebody else. Either it's the narrator, it's Hitler, and that also means perception matters. Like Hitler's perception of the bastards is very different than the narrators, and it's very different than even later on when it's Aldo telling the story of the Bear Jew, when he's introducing them to the Nazi they've captured. So I think already, like, Tarantino does this a lot, where he uses his characters to clue us in to the approach to storytelling and filmmaking that he's using, where he's saying, like, don't trust anything you're seeing. Everything is somebody's perspective of this story. And I'm going to do this over and over and over and over.
I'm going to use that to segue into a point I wanted to make here, because I totally agree with you. Obviously the story, like I said, there's this frame of the story of the bastards is being told over to Hitler because they actually they let one of the men live so that he can go back and kind of tell the story. And part of what happens when they leave all these characters alive to kind of tell their stories, it's almost this like myth making thing. They create their legend. And one of my favorite moments in the film watching this time, and might be my favorite part of the movie, is that they talk about the Bear Jew. And obviously there's this incredible introduction of the Bear Jew, and he's swinging his bat.
Sergeant Donnie Donowitz. You might know him better by his nickname, the Bear Jew. Now, have you heard Aldo the Apache? You got heard about the Bear Jew.
I heard of the Bear Jew.
What'd you hear?
Beats German soldiers with a club.
He bashes the brains in with a baseball bat, what he does.
But what I loved is that the person that's talking to Hitler, I think, mentions that some people are calling him like a golem, right? They're referring to him as like a Jewish golem. And just to fill in, I have like a Wikipedia page up here just talking about, the famous golem. It's just like, it's this, sort of Jewish folklore of this like character that could be kind of like fashioned and created out of like clay. I think it usually is in the times of the Talmud that would come to life and protect Jewish cities. And one of the famous ones is, from the Maharal of Prague, and this, character a couple hundred years ago. And they had this story of like this golem that would protect them. And it's just, I remember, I don't know who to quote on this, because I remember someone was explaining, like, they were just talking about the Jews created these stories, whether, how much truth you want to read into the story of the actual Golem of Prague, whether or not it's true. They created these stories because in a lot of societies, Jews were a defenseless people, and they needed this myth, this symbol, this sort of like symbolic strength to kind of defend themselves. And, Hitler very quickly, when he hears, in the movie that they're calling him a golem, he says, I don't want you saying like, no one should call him that. No, don't call him the bear Jew anymore. Don't call him a golem. He's, he's just a soldier, because he's trying to avoid this myth. But I think what's happening in that scene is exactly what is happening in this movie, where it's, Tarantino is casting, unfortunately, a very defenseless Jewish people at the time of, World War II, at the time of the Holocaust, and giving them, their own golems. He's giving them heroes. He's giving them these like strong Jews. And just, a lot of times we see the Jewish caricature even on screen now as like this sort of, meek, very like weak, wimpy, nebbishy character. Exactly. That is a Jewish caricature. And then anytime you get to see just these really strong, powerful Jews on screen, it's kind of thrilling. And I love the way that, like you said, Yechiel, about just sort of like the storytelling that he's calling attention to. I love that Tarantino clearly did his research and just throws in that line about the golem, which to some people might be a throwaway line, but I just read it as like, that's what he's doing. He's creating the myth of the bastards. And I just thought that was spectacular.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the best things that happens in that scene is finally like the emergence of this bear Jew, and he's huge and he has his bat, and then he opens his mouth and it's like the most ridiculous voice.
Teddy fucking Williams knocks it out of the park. Fenway Park on his feet for Teddy. Fucking ball game. He went yard on that one onto fucking Lansdowne Street. You.
He's a kid. He's like a child.
His Boston accent. Oh,
the golem to like the golem's not supposed to speak, and here the golem speaks. He's a human being, and he still bashes the crap out of that guy's head and body, as if he's the golem. Like, just because he's human doesn't mean he's not like the most threatening and
totally
vengeful, no matters which way you look at it, creature.
So Shoshana is, owning this movie theater in France, and she's putting up letters where she's assumed an identity, and she bumps into Frederick Zoller, played by Daniel Bruhl, and he's kind of aggressively hitting on her, and she's really not having it. We find out later in the film he's like this very celebrated war hero who killed something like 300 people, and I think she's not having any of it, and good for her for like sticking up and not taking shit from this guy. Super
very brave too. Super
totally.
Brave. I mean, she shows her bravery. You can talk about the bravery of the bastards and how they exemplify one element of like the powerful Jew and the Jew not to be messed with. She's pretty badass in her own way.
Totally.
As well. I mean, I'll say during the scene where she and Christoph Waltz are eating the pastry, I was nauseous. I could not believe Christoph Waltz had a way of eating in this whole movie when he was drinking the milk in the opening scene, eating, and it just made me nauseous every single time. And she held her own. Interestingly, when she comes upon Zoller and they basically kidnap her, bring her to the restaurant, and she's talking to Zoller and he's hitting on her again. And she says, like, maybe you should try some chicken Vichy, right? Which is her way of saying, I do not support the Nazis.
Right.
I mean, that is freaking ballsy. That is brave. And so she has these series of moments way before, and I don't want to, spoiler alert till we talk about it. When what she does at the end is obviously incredibly powerful and brave, but they really do a good job. Even the act of escaping the house was an act of bravery, and running while someone is shooting you. I just thought that she, in this moment, like, I'm not sure how wise it was in that moment for an everyday French woman to be denying a Nazi soldier
in uniform,
asking her out on a date.
Totally.
So for me, this is like the first glimpse into who this woman is, and is a precursor. Like, it tips us off that she's going to be pretty badass.
I really like that you point that out in this scene, because you're right. The last time we saw her was she's running away. And I agree with you. It's very brave that she escapes with her life. She's being shot at and she kind of darts, but still it's sort of her back to us and she's running away. And then when we come back to her, I guess, 20 minutes later in story time or however long later, I totally agree with you. She's in this very powerful position. She's up top on a ladder because she's fixing the sign. So she's standing above this Frederick Zoller, and we see someone in a Nazi uniform. And as an audience, it's like, don't mess. He might have a short temper and he has a lot of power over you. And she does mess. outright rejects him and says, no, I'm not doing this. And the only reason that she agrees with his big plan to premiere the new movie that he's in, at her cinema is because she's kidnapped and she's literally left with no choice. But, had her own way, she wouldn't have done it.
Yeah. I mean, somebody's asking you out with a gun in their pocket. You at least take a moment to think about it, no?
Yep.
She actually does two things really important in the scene. One is she uses movies and her knowledge of movies to kind of like both tell him what she's about and also to shut him down.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And there's one point I think is very interesting as a Jewish person who's basically hiding in plain sight is he asks for her name and she whips out her papers to give him.
Yeah.
And I think that's something about her ability to like, I am exactly who you think I am in front. And we as the audience are the only ones that know who she really is.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're introduced to some other characters who are going to be assisting the Bastards. We meet Lieutenant Archie Hickok. There's a nice cameo by Mike Myers, who plays a British general. And Hickok's, played by Michael Fassbender, is set to meet up with an undercover agent, Bridget von Hammersmark. And they're supposed to rendezvous it turns out it's a basement. And they meet up. And a couple of the Bastards accompany her. And again, another scene full of tension, just like watching a pot boil, like slowly but surely the bubbles come up and eventually we boil over and we have this huge explosion of violence. But it's just so much tension because the scene is so long and you're just waiting for somebody to pull a gun and like shoot something. And it just takes so long. And like for every minute that passed for me, at least, I was like, all right, this is when it's going to happen. This is when something's going to happen. But no, something else comes in and, kind of cools the boil a little bit.
Yeah, it's one of those scenes where it's like you just wish like they had done something differently, because the only reason that they're having this meetup is really just to sort of touch base and exchange information on the plan. It's Michael Fassbender's character, he's the sort of British agent, the British spy, and he's kind of just meeting up with Bridget von Hammersmark and the Bastards, and they were just supposed to go to a sort of nondescript location, talk about what the mission was, and then kind of meet up again when it was time to conduct the mission. And there's this big tension because Bridget von Hammersmark insists on this place that they find out it is not only a basement but also happens to be that night filled with German soldiers, with Nazi soldiers. And she says, she's like, normally it's not, but there happens to be a group here kind of celebrating their birthday. And once all that happens, like you just want them to leave because there's nothing bad should happen here. They were just going to have a rendezvous and they're kind of undercover as Nazi soldiers, but the whole time you're just waiting, like, just go upstairs and leave. And she's like, no, we can't go right away. It'll be suspicious. I've been waiting here all night. And if we don't even have a drink, so then they have a drink. And then, then there's another sort of high ranking Nazi official who kind of spots them and comes over. And that's really where the tension starts, because it's just, you're hoping that they're not found out. And you're hoping that, this British character has good enough German that he can he can evade them, and, that no one slips up. But, obviously as the scene goes on, they slip up quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, as you alluded to, Harry, they almost get away with it. They're almost ready to like have their conversation. They've played the bar games. They've had the 30-year-old whiskey. Bridget has signed a napkin, which will become important later on. And then the thing that gives it away, the thing that leads to all this violence, is when Michael Fassbender is asking for 3 glasses. He says,
3 Gläser.
And he does this. He does 3 fingers like this, as opposed to 3 fingers like this.
Well,
you're just gonna have to use your imagination if you're listening.
3 middle fingers rather than the thumb and two.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Thank you for explaining that. That's helpful for our audio listeners.
The listeners, this or this is not that helpful.
That's true. That's true.
I'll have to check the Instagram for bonus content.
Now,
TikTok.
Jodi, before the recording, you were telling me that there is some sort of like related story historically. Yeah.
I suspect that this is based on a real story from World War II that my father recounted to me as a young person, that there was a British spy, not a British spy, an American spy who was caught by the Germans. Why? He went to dinner with them. And, as Americans, usually we have our fork in our left hand, our knife in our right hand. We slice a piece of chicken or whatever, and then we transfer the fork from the left hand to the right hand and put the food in our mouth. But in Europe, they don't do that. They cut the fork with the left hand, fork in the left hand, knife in the right hand. They cut the meat and then they take it right from the plate in their left hand and eat with their left hand. And there is a story that I am at least aware of, that there was a U.S. spy who was caught for this, not because of language, not because of accent, but because he made the fatal mistake of transferring his fork from his left hand to his right hand. So I wonder if that was an inspiration for Tarantino for these little tiny gestures that do give us away.
Yeah, I mean, you'd think that they would teach this in spy school, you know?
I
All these little details.
Hope they do now.
It's literally like a matter of life and death in this situation, you know, because Michael Fassbender orders it, you know, a different way. The senior German officer catches on to him, and violence ensues. There's a Mexican standoff. How these German soldiers know what a Mexican standoff is, you know, questionable, but yeah, then the violence breaks out fairly quickly. It honestly reminded me of the finale or the conclusion of Reservoir Dogs, where just everyone is pointing a gun at each other and then they just all shoot each other and they're all dead. And we just have smoke, you know, rising and everything like that. But Yechiel, we haven't heard from you for a while. What's up?
I just keep on thinking, I love this scene. It is maybe the longest scene in the entire movie. And what is this scene doing in this movie? Like,
right.
It advances a few plot points. It could have been handled in like literally 3 minutes.
Yep.
And it has nothing to do with the larger story necessarily. It's not about the bastards necessarily, the revenge. It's more about this character that's essentially killed off in the scene, this British spy.
Yeah, totally.
And has really nothing to do with Shoshana and her revenge story. And
it's just the napkin.
I mean, it's the napkin. It's the
yeah, but I think those are like plot devices. Like,
yeah.
He didn't need 30 minutes of suspense. I think there's two things here that are very interesting for us, especially in the context of our conversation, which is spying. There's a major theme of spying here that gets. If you look at every plot synopsis of this movie, you'll never mention it. But this heart of this movie is about this British spy and this German spy, and like what Jodi's story illustrates is just how tenuous it was. Like how the Allies' attempts to thwart the Nazis, even during, and one thing that's, you know, said in the movie, but a lot of people don't talk about in the context of the movie, is this movie takes place really as the Nazis are trying to lose. Like they're really,
right.
Even if, you know, what happens later doesn't happen, the Nazis are going to lose this war.
Right.
And here, such tenuous things, such little things in a basement are at the crux of whether or not things will turn in this war. And I think that's one thing Tarantino's trying to do. And the other thing he's trying to do is just you know, just show how quickly something that is a benign evening out to celebrate a soldier's son being born
hours ago
can become this deadly violent moment. And that is a Tarantino thing forever. Like for his love of dialogue, which is so beautiful. We get these scenes where they're just exchanging this beautiful like repertoire, lead to this like bodies everywhere. And that is, I think, a big Tarantino like auteur moment right there.
I'll also say I do think everything you were saying about the spying is so true, because we said this at the top of the movie. We were talking about that Shoshana sequence and how it was amazing that he's at least spotlighting for, you know, one section of the movie, the sort of what that means to be hiding in the Holocaust and what that means to be, you know, how delicate it is to hide and what it takes to break someone. You know, obviously in that first scene, the family that's taking care of the Dreyfuses, I'm sure he's been protecting them for a long time. He says that they survived a year, like a couple months earlier when they were investigated by whoever was in, you know, Hans Landa's position before him, the previous sort of Jew hunter, so to speak. They cleared that. So clearly they'd been hiding them for a long time. And it's just so precarious, you know, what that means to just stay hidden and, you know, that delicate balance. And this entire scene, it's a protracted, you know, 30-minute scene. And it's so effective because we're introduced to, you know, sort of Michael Fassbender's character in the middle of the movie. And it's like, who's this new character? He's got to be a big deal. And we have his whole training and we learn about his background in cinema. He's written certain books about you know, German cinema. And it's like, we think we have this whole character, but then because of one small thing, it's sort of in the balance. Like his life obviously is in the balance and he's killed. And this whole theme of this whole theme of spying and hiding, really, and hiding your identity to survive in the war is so pronounced that it reminded me, as you were talking, of the end of the movie, right? Because I'll touch on the end of the movie. We'll work to this in the plot, but the final moment, it's a scene that's actually alluded to earlier on, where when the bastards first have their, you know, their squad of Germans that they're killing, the last one, before they kill him, Aldo asks him, he says, when this war is over and, the Germans have lost, and like we said, the Nazis were on the cusp of losing, are you going to wear your suit ever again? Are you going to wear your uniform, or are you going to take it off? And, thinking he's saying the right answer, he's like, I'm going to take it off. And then Aldo Rain goes, that's what I was afraid of. I don't want you to hide anything. Like, I don't want you to pretend that you weren't what you weren't. You can't hide from the sins of your past. And they literally carve a swastika into his forehead. And that's called back to, to say that this is a big theme of the movie, that's called back to in the very last scene of the movie when they do that, and we'll get up to when we go through the plot, why they do this to Aldo Rain, but they do it to Aldo Rain at the end. And it's just, there's this whole theme the entire time of
to Hans Landa. They do it to Hans Landa.
Oh yeah. Sorry. Not to Aldo Rain. Yeah. They do it to Hans
Aldo
Landa. Thank
does
you.
it too.
Yeah.
He wouldn't do it to himself. That'd be strange.
Important, Harry, is we are set up with three basic tropes in a good guy category. Shoshana, who's one type of trope, who's in plain sight but hiding something and orchestrating this revenge plot of her own. You have the bastards, who are literally wearing German uniforms, like they are masquerading as Germans to kill Germans and want their story told. Like they are out in the open. And then you have these spies that are deceptive in their uniforms and their language. And if you just think about it in general, Tarantino does not have very nice things to say ultimately about the spies. He kills all of them off. They are all failed in their spycraft. It's supposed to be the spies that end up at the theater, not the bastards. The bastards you don't put in the theater.
Yeah.
They're recognizable. They're the
muscle.
So
yeah.
And I think that's listen, we'll get into the Jewish stuff later, but I think this has to do also with the nature of what it means to be Jewish and assimilated. And is it better to
interesting
hiding and manipulating your way around, or is it better to be out in the open? I also want to say making what's his name's character a film critic, a writer.
Yeah,
awesome.
Fassbender
also shows you what Tarantino thinks of film critics. Shows this guy off.
I love it.
His old talk blows it.
He's a little pretentious. He definitely has that air to him.
Why I love doing this doing our podcast with you. He notices the tiniest detail.
There you go.
Chef's kiss.
That's why you keep him around for sure. That makes sense.
You're so right about that.
Yeah. So after to move things along, after Bridget is the lone survivor of this incredibly violent shootout, Aldo Rain comes and rescues her, and they end up in a standoff with the father of this new child. Again, like Harry said, it's a protracted negotiation. Will you come down? You put down your gun. You put down your gun. Whatever. He comes down. He rescues Bridget. Bridget takes out the gun and shoots the new father, and Bridget is rescued. It has become clear that their initial plans, like Yechiel mentioned, the spies are dead, so the bastards are going to have to sub in.
And the plan is they're going to go to the premiere basically with bombs strapped to their legs and blow the whole thing up and kill, all the leaders of the Third Reich.
Meanwhile, Shoshana is also hatching her own plan. Frederick Zoller and Goebbels decide that they want to move the premiere to a smaller theater, one that Shoshana owns. And that is the plan. Shoshana, realizing that there's going to be roughly 400 plus Nazis in her theater, decides that the time is now to set it ablaze and blow it up. So they're going to use the film stock. She works with her boyfriend to hatch up a plan where she's going to film herself, edit in a snippet of film as a FU message to them, and then they're going to set the film stock ablaze and kill everyone. Meanwhile, at the vet's office,
one important point.
Go ahead.
Is that there's going to be a Goebbels decides. We see a scene where Hitler decides he's going to attend this thing, and that's the big piece of information that what's her name had that she was going to disclose to the other
Hammersmark.
Hitler's
getting Madeline Kahn vibes.
Yes.
What's that?
Every time you say that name, von Hammersmark.
Oh yeah. Right. Exactly.
It's interesting that you mentioned Hitler was going to go to the premiere, because the reason he says, in a scene where he says he's going to go, is because he's I think we need this movie right now. We need, and just going back to the point we made earlier that you made, Yechiel, about just the power of stories and how that's sort of conveying, and how Tarantino is very aware of that. Hitler kind of recognizes we need some morale. This is he says this was a great story of this Frederick Zoller. It'll give people, it'll inspire people. So that's why he decides he's going to go to the premiere as a sort of symbolic, cosign, so to speak, to this movie, to this story as German propaganda.
Really important. We haven't talked about this guy has been hitting on, and this war hero has been hitting on, Shoshana the whole time. I feel like funny calling her Shoshana because she's really not Shoshana. No. I think she's only referred to as Shoshana once more in the whole movie by her lover. And there's this amazing thing where this movie is like Goebbels' greatest like propaganda piece, and he is going to premiere this. It's not just a piece of art or a piece of cinema. It is going to be the thing that should turn the tides for them. And that's why Hitler, and like the fact that a film is being described in a Tarantino movie is the thing that could change like the momentum of the war. It just tells you what Tarantino thinks about the power of cinema, and and I think Shoshana picks up on that. Like she has to use this film against them, and their fervor for this film against them.
Yeah, they also mentioned Leni Riefenstahl, who's like a famous German film director. She directed Triumph of the Will, which is like a very famous example of German propaganda. So yeah, the power of film in this movie is real, and the way that it can affect people. Yeah, after the bastards are fitted for tuxedos and they've practiced their Italian, they accompany Bridget von Hammersmark to the premiere. We have another awesome scene from Hans Landa where he introduces himself to Bridget von Hammersmark and Brad Pitt, where we get a really good sample of his Italian, which he must have practiced for quite some time.
And with then that heavy Southern accent.
Arrivederci.
So good. Very funny stuff. And we also meet Donnie Donowitz and I don't remember the other guy's name, but Rocco, yeah. But they have the most amazingly Italian names, which escape me. But it's a cat and mouse game. I think he clearly knows something's up because he recognizes something is amiss.
Landa's already found that napkin that was signed by her. So he's onto her.
And the shoe, right? So he found at the basement shootout, Landa eventually makes it there, and he finds a shoe. Which
you know what I love about that?
Yes.
The napkin would have been more than enough to identify her and for him to trace her down.
Totally.
The shoe is added because, Tarantino and his famous foot fetish, he wanted, I guess, one scene of the sort of Landa putting the shoe on Hammersmark's, foot, and that kind of very
second. But I think that actually is even more important than just his fetish.
Okay.
Interesting. Storytelling.
Yeah, I mean, it's like two forms of ID, kind of thing. But there's a very long discussion about mountain climbing because she has a fresh cast on from the vet's office. They discuss when did you get the cast? It's still wet.
What mountain near Paris did you climb recently?
Yeah, really. I mean, I think it's a theme in this movie, like the Germans pressing non-Germans for very important details, like in the bar down in the basement. What part of France are you from? Because you have an accent. I can tell you're from Frankfurt. I can tell you're from Brussels. What's your accent all about? Just really the detail-oriented German stereotype in this film is real. And I think
more than detail-oriented, I think Landa especially represents like incredible knowledge. Like he knows multiple languages. He's always one step ahead of everybody else. He knows more than the people there. And like Aldo and all the bastards really represent like the classic American who doesn't know anything and is just a giant bulldozer, pounding their way through things. And like that standoff, you think like, okay, like how's this going to end other than Landa winning? Like he has them outsmarted.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's very interesting. And I think the way that he effortlessly just switches to Italian and then just talks at them, and the bastards clearly don't know a word of Italian, and and he knows something's up. So then he takes Bridget von Hammersmark to a private room. They discuss some things, and very quickly that devolves, and he, rather than shoot her, he chokes her to death. And it's like a very gruesome sort of death scene. Like Harry mentioned, there is that trying on the shoe, making sure it fits before he making sure he's dotting his I's and crossing his T's before he kills her. And he's very dedicated.
Does anyone else get a Cinderella reference here?
A little bit.
100%.
I
little bit.
That too.
could not figure out what would make Quentin Tarantino include, as a shoe connoisseur myself, and let me assure you,
Ooh.
those shoes were magnificent. I just was like, this is very bizarre to me that there's this weird like Disney reference inside a World War II film.
It is a fairy
So
tale in some regard.
Let's remember Cinderella is a fairy tale from France originally. And
Okay.
and think about
Look at
the
this
role
guy.
that fairy tales play in myth making and stories. I think this is part of his larger theme of Landa and what he represents. There is this extra layer. He can't just shoot her. He's gonna kill her. He has to play this fairy tale story with her as if he's constructing a narrative. I actually don't know if he planned to choke her originally. I think he was going to shoot her. And remember, she shoots him. You know, she goes after him first.
Right.
And then they struggle, and then he chokes her.
Okay.
And I think I got to say, we're going to talk about violence as it plays out in the rest of this sequence in the theater.
Yeah.
And maybe even in the closing scene. But I actually think that choking scene, the way it was shot and the way Tarantino holds on him, that was to me the most affecting violent scene in the movie. Like you have to watch this woman get choked out and like literally watch as like, and then her foot is the last thing we see to know that she's dead.
Yeah.
Like,
Yep.
like what is he doing here? Like, and why is it like the most violent, the most realistic violence in the movie rather than, let's say the gun shooting and the bear with the bat? Even the bear with the bat, we don't see it. He cuts away. Why this violence against this woman does he not cut away? And I've always wondered that in this movie.
Yeah.
That's
I mean, what was her crime, right? I mean, trying to be deceptive and ultimately try to help out the team. But yeah, she didn't do anything far worse than any of the other people who he murdered throughout the film.
And I will just add, like, I think you're right that that's one of the most important violent scenes in the film. You know, one of the famous pieces of trivia about this movie is that Tarantino didn't actually like the way that that Christoph Waltz was actually choking her. So those are actually his hands. Like, it's Tarantino's hands that are actually choking her there. And it's kind of that whole bit about how Tarantino kind of puts himself into all his movies, and people say he wasn't in Bastards. And then some people say, no, he was. He does a cameo with his hands there.
In Kill Bill 1, where he claims that she asked him to, but he like chokes her with like a necklace or something. It's his hands, not the character's hands. Like, this is not the only time he's done this. Like, he's put himself into the frame in this way.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I mean,
and I think I know it. Like, I think after a movie with so much sort of like distance and so much sort of like shooting and just like, you know, these sort of very violent, like, added like with guns kind of powerful things, to see him use his sort of raw brutality. It's like the first time we've seen someone so this character who's been so refined and so orderly kind of not quite lose his cool, but just get very aggressive, you know, for the first time. I think it's striking, and it's a little bit like he's slipping. He had so much control over the situation, and then he kind of results to this, and
it's a little
sloppy.
sloppy.
It's a little sloppy, and he walks out of the room and he kind of like collects himself a little bit and straightens up. But it's the first time in the movie that we kind of see him. He's just as scary as he's been, but he seems a little bit almost like a loose cannon to a certain extent, and it sets up some of the twists that we actually see.
What was it that threatened him so much about her? Like, she was German, and
she was a woman, and you know what? He's got mommy issues. I'm sorry, I have to be the voice of women for a moment, because I also think that Tarantino is like, let's put the worst violence on the woman. I don't know what the motivation is. I don't know what the issue is, but you know, there are Nazis who are getting treated with better murders, better killing. You know, I guess one could argue that shooting someone in the testicles is a unhospitable gesture. But the personal nature of killing the woman in the movie, I don't know, pissed me off a little bit. I'll be honest.
Totally. Because a little bit later in the scene, you know, there's obviously like they're kind of all watching the movie, right? Because then I'll just get us to the scene instead of
there, baby.
Ahead. But so then this all comes to a climax. The movie actually starts, and the Bastards are kind of working on their plan. Although obviously Aldo Rain is then sort of kidnapped because he's found out by, you know, Hans Landa, and they're kind of removed from the scene. But, you know, still at the theater are two of the Bastards, and then also Shoshana and her plan. And as Shoshana is kind of working through her plan, she's going to change like the film reel. During the fourth film reel is going to be this special one where she spliced her face into it, and she's kind of getting ready to do that. And she has her partner, lock the doors to the theater because their plan is going to be to trap everyone, all the Nazis in the theater, burn the whole thing down. And as she's about to do that, Frederick Zoller, who's in the theater, manages to walk out, I guess, before the doors are locked, because he kind of needs to step away from the movie. He seems for the first time to be a little bit uncomfortable with some of the violence that he was so proud of this entire time. But I guess watching it on screen has a legitimate effect on him. And he goes into the projection room to kind of visit, to visit Shoshana. And she's obviously very hesitant at first, and she kind of is very tough with him. But what I wanted to mention, just in terms of what you were talking about, Jodi, about the sort of violence against women, all of a sudden his facade, and there was no denying it, he obviously was very forceful with Shoshana and very aggressive. And even though he was trying to masquerade as this polite, he's like, what did I ever do to you? I've been so nice to you. He brings out that kind of sort of nice guy syndrome that, we see more commonly in the lexicon today.
Right.
And he kind of he slams the door open, and it hurts her, and she winces in pain. And he's like, oh, it's good to know that you can feel. I mean, it may be something physical and nothing internal, but all of a sudden it's just it's this repressed sexuality, right? It's this, he's being denied by this woman, and he feels like he should get everyone. All these other women in the movie are sort of fangirling over him. And then, there's this one who's rejecting her, and he goes from being the sort of nice guy, oh, I'm not going to press you too much, to very forceful,
Yeah.
But then she does turn it around, and she says, all right, let's do it. Close the door. Let's take off your clothes. Let's do this right here. And
he uses that.
Totally.
She uses that to her advantage. She really takes advantage of his very clear sort of
horniness,
frustration.
I mean,
yeah,
I
call it that.
And she's, he's sort of awestruck. He's like, really? Okay, great. So he starts to, he closes the door and everything. She pulls out her gun. She gets him a couple times. He gets a few shots in. They kill each other, but she's able to switch the reel right in time before she dies. And it's at that point where the last reel plays. Shoshana is able to deliver her final FU to the Nazis, which gives her boyfriend the signal to light
before we go into this next thing, can we just talk about that last scene? Because there's interspersed with this all happening is Landa doing his negotiation with Aldo. And so you're getting them negotiating, basically Landa revealing his hand that he sees where the war is going. And this is his opportunity with all those people in there. And he knows that there's still some bastards there. And he wants to, he's now showing his real cards. Even though he just killed this woman, he wants to negotiate his, new adventures in America.
Yeah.
Where's one
Nantucket. Yeah. Ever the opportunist,
So we're hoping that Shoshana will get free, so we don't have to need Landa, and it doesn't matter what happens to Aldo. And I think that's an amazing thing that Tarantino's doing. He set up the whole movie so we have these two possible, heroes. And when Shoshana gets shot, first of all, she doesn't get shot until she goes over to check on it. That's a huge mistake because he plays dead, which is the worst kind of thing to do.
He's hiding.
And he shoots her back when she's, trying to help him. It's the first time she's shown any sort of caring for this man. And then once she's dead, now we know, okay, all we have left is whether or not Aldo and Landa will come to some kind of deal. And whether he'll call in the guards on the remaining bastards or not. And, that's, I think, sets up, the real tension in this moment.
Right.
Whereas, it's all going to come down to whether or not the Nazi we've hated the whole movie is going to be the Nazi that actually lets all of us get what we want.
Yeah, he does deliver quite an interesting scene. The way he phrases it, the way that it's set up with the phone. I have this phone in front of me. I can either call it and it will change the course of things. And, ultimately he doesn't call it in, and the bastards do complete their job. They are able to get access to Hitler and Goebbels upstairs. They murder them. The film stock catches fire, and I read somewhere that Eli Roth and his co-star almost burned to death because the heat was so intense that maybe had they not got out in a certain amount of time, I think the building would have collapsed because it was way hotter than they had planned.
Giant, eagle Third Reich thing that fell at one point. That was not supposed to fall. The steel wires were holding it up melted.
Oh my goodness!
It was supposed to be 800 degrees, and it was 2,000 degrees. Something ridiculous, thing.
Oh my God! Someone's fired.
Looked good. It looked good.
Right. But everyone dies. Like in the explosion, the dynamite goes off of our bastards. They have hidden dynamite in their ankles, and both dynamites, both sets of dynamite go off in the theater. The entire theater blows up. Mission accomplished. All those Nazis are dead. Most of the bastards are dead. We finish with Aldo and the short Jew played by BJ Novak.
Yep.
And we end up in a forest on the line. Remind me again, what was the significance of the area they were? It was like on the Allied line.
Yeah. And now they could like switch, and Aldo could take the lead in bringing them over the line.
Got it. Okay. And so Aldo brings out Hans Landa, and I thought that'd be like some sort of like anticlimactic pop, and then he's dead. But that didn't happen. Aldo takes out his trademark knife. It gives him a goodbye present, carves a swastika in the forehead, and they march off in the sunset, and the movie's over. Did I miss anything before we go to break?
Just some minor points. I think already Harry alluded to. There's a callback of a conversation where he basically asks him, "So when you go to Nantucket, like, are you gonna still wear your uniform?" And he's like, "No, I'm gonna take it off." And it's like this whole thing of like, you don't get to walk away from being a Nazi. I'm gonna make sure everybody knows you're a Nazi. But he also like takes out his gun and shoots the driver. Like, there's violence right there, and he basically tells the short Jew, like, there's a whole thing throughout the movie because he's the Apache, that he needs scalps, and he tells him to like scalp, and we're literally watching scalp the guy's head as this last bit is playing out, and it's almost like this casual violence that's just playing out in this scene that is, it's horrifying in a way, and
they have a very go ahead.
I think what it does is in this last like scene where it's like, these evil sort of Nazis that obviously are the villains throughout the entire movie. It's like they're almost getting away with it because, they've negotiated this big plan and they're actually going to work out. And it's like, as much as it's like great because it worked out, and obviously this is the point where you realize a lot of this movie wasn't true, / none of it really was, because Hitler's killed and the entire the leaders of the Third Reich are killed, and yes, they're killed, but then you kind of see Hans Landa and this other guy getting away, and it's almost this like one last nod, like, don't worry, I'm not going to let these Nazis off easy. We're going to kill one of them. And then, Hans Landa, he's not going to die at the end, but it's almost like a worse punishment for him because like everyone else in the film, he's also like been hiding, and he has these like dual motives, and he has this, I'm only looking out for myself. And he's trying to, hide himself as this American sympathizer. Even when he's negotiating his kind of like freedom in America, he says, let the record show that I was an undercover agent the entire time, and that I was actually working with the Americans the entire time, trying to like stop the Nazis from the inside. So he's going to try to hide under this cover. And it's one last, like, we're not letting anyone get away with it, and we're not letting anyone hide who they really are. And that's why, there's that incredible moment. They give him the swastika, and then Brad Pitt sort of ends the film. I think this might be my masterpiece, which some people say is also Tarantino saying that, to close out one of his, probably one of his best films. So it's an amazing moment.
On that note, we'll take a quick break. We'll come back with our ratings for Inglourious Basterds. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Jews on Film. We are here with Jodi Berman and Yechiel Hoffman of Two Movie Jews, and we are here to give our ratings and scores for Inglourious Basterds. Well, coin toss previous to our recording has said that Jodi, because you're our guest, you can go first. We're going to rate our film on a scale of 1 to 5 Jewish stars, taking into account things like Jewish content, Jewish cast and crew, Jewish themes, and then as a bonus, is this good for the Jews?
That's my favorite question. So while I love this film, I mean, in regular life, 5 stars, I don't think it's that Jewy. I don't think it's that Jewish. I am going to give it like 2.5, 3 stars from a Jew. It's certainly, a Jewish masturbatory dream in terms of, revenge fantasy, but not that Jewish. And so I give it like 2.5, 3 stars. And is it good for the Jews? I think it is good for the Jews. I think seeing strong, I would love it if more of the Jewish characters were played by Jews, but we'll not go down that rabbit hole. But I do think projecting a sense of strength and pride and, can I swear on this podcast?
Fuck yeah.
Okay, and Don't Fuck With Us is good for the Jews. And it's actually like even more of an argument to me for the state of Israel. Like Jews can be super strong eh, despite Nebuchadnezzar, like any of the stereotypes. And so I'm going to say yes, good for the Jews, and 2.5, 3 stars in terms of Jewishness.
So I'm not going to weigh in just yet, but I wanted to clarify your last point because Melanie Laurent is half Jewish. Her dad is she has both Ashkenaz and Sephardic roots.
Yep.
Eli Roth is Jewish. BJ Novak is Jewish. Paul Rust, who played one of the other bastards, is not Jewish. Brad Pitt is not Jewish.
Yes. Anyway. And Brad Pitt, the boss, the leader, the strongest of the strong, the guy who does the recruiting, who's recruiting Dafka Jews on purpose, right? Not Jewish.
Right. Harry, should we go to you or should we go to Yechiel? What do you think? Maybe mix and match? Okay, go ahead.
So I just want to say before we jump in that, Christoph Waltz is not Jewish. He's German-Austrian. His first wife was Jewish, and his son is an Orthodox rabbi who lives in Israel. So apparently he used to call his son while they were on set to ask questions about things. Sometimes you don't know you're casting, you're getting a lot of extra knowledge as well. I want to say this is a very tough one. I had always thought of this as like a Jewy film, and I was excited when it came out because I'm like, yeah, we get a film about Jews taking revenge. And then I watched it again this week, knowing you'd ask this question and thinking to myself, of the 4 main characters, only one of them is Jewish. None of the Jewish characters that we see, other than the BJ Novak, short Jew, survive this movie.
Right.
It's like they're Jewish characters. So if we're gonna have like a 1 to 5 scale, but in that scale, it's like you said Frisco Kid is like the most Jewish movie ever made.
I didn't say that. I didn't say that. Easy. I did not say that. Okay.
I might think that,
but on the 3 scale would be like Schindler's List, and this is like Schindler's List Jewish. There are Jewish characters. There's things happening to Jews in the movie, but it's really it's a Gentiles movie. It's their movie. It's their perspective. It's them like taking the Golem story and making it part of their story. And this is ultimately not to me as much of a Jewish story necessarily. And I can talk also thematically in a little bit. We wanted to talk about the nature of violence in this movie, and even the double identity aspect about this is Quentin Tarantino's movie, and I don't think it would. I think it's distinctly for him. It's his movie. It's not a Jewish movie.
Right. And so where are you coming in number wise? 3. Okay.
So more Jewish than not, but not much more.
So just so we have our scoreboard up here. Jodi, you said 2.5, 3?
2.5 to 3.
Okay,
2.75.
Yeah, 3.5. Because if you wanted to stretch that to like a 7.
No, now we're at 3. So exactly the median.
So it's good you're on the same podcast wavelength that you kind of come in at roughly the same numbers. Harry, no pressure.
Yeah, 5 stars for sure. No, I'm kidding. Definitely not. I'm happy I got to go third because I really wanted to hear the points that you both made, and I really. It's all the same questions I've been wondering. And I had the same thoughts where this is a complicated movie because it feels like a Jewish movie. It's the Bear Jew. It's the bastards that are Jewish. But is this such a Jewish story? And what does that even mean? And obviously that's a rubric that we continue to make up week over week. And, we don't know, but I don't know. I've been thinking about that a lot. I actually, at the time that we're recording this, it's right around the time that the new Thor movie comes out. And if you're wondering why I brought that up, it's because the director of that, Taika Waititi, recently made a movie a couple of years ago that was called Jojo Rabbit, and it was a similar Holocaust story. And I say similar because it told a story of a lot of Nazi officials and people in the war without actually delving into the concentration camps, into the Holocaust parts of it. It was more of a World War II story. And I was looking back at that film and thinking about it and reading some of the criticism about it is that it proclaims to be this sort of Jewish story, but there's only really one Jewish character in the entire thing. It's really like a Nazi story, and it's really like a war story. And I tried to apply that same logic to this movie, and I was thinking, just because it's a sort of a Holocaust adjacent World War II film, that doesn't by default make it a Jewish film. What about the content actually was Jewish? And There's definitely a lot of war stuff. So I definitely think that this is a World War II film, like we've said earlier, more so than it's a, Holocaust film, so to speak. But there definitely are a lot of Jewish characters in there. The Shoshana character, she really is the emotional center of the film. She has this big, she's the one that we're rooting for. She takes this big revenge. And obviously this theme of, revenge is not just, it might not be a Jewish ideal, but this was actually something I loved. Like, lest you thought this was like sort of anti-Hitler, very just sort of like World War II film, but not a Jewish one. The climactic scene, we were talking about it, when she kind of gets on the screen, she gets in like the projector screen and delivers her, like she basically cites that she's giving revenge, she's taking revenge on the Nazis there. She says,
"My name is Shoshana Dreyfus, and this is the face of Jewish vengeance."
And I love that she had the word Jewish vengeance in there, because it really it wasn't just like at its core, at the end of the day, this really was a reclamation story, not for Americans in World War II and not for the Allies. It was for the Jews. And that was the framing of the story. That's how he starts the film. He puts the film in the position of, Tarantino starts the film showing these Jewish characters, in their hiding, and like highlights that very real, very scary element of what it meant to be a Jew in France during World War II. And then even at the heart of this film, at the climactic moment, he really keeps it Jewish. So I do have, the same qualms we all do about Brad Pitt being cast as not necessarily, as, being cast and not being Jewish. And, not all of the bastards, I assume they all were, because I knew, Eli Roth was, and I knew BJ Novak were, but I guess not all of them were Jewish. And I think thematically, there are some Jewish themes there. We mentioned the Golem, we mentioned that stuff about sort of Jewish heroes, but it's not like so pervasive. So for that reason, I'm probably still going to go 3.5, which I think is a little bit above what the two of you did, because I really do think that this is like the Jewish vengeance film. And to answer the question of good for the Jews, I think this movie is awesome for the Jews. I think it really puts power back in the hands of the Jews. It gives us a sort of modern day Golem where we can point to these Jews, we can point to Aldo Rain and to the Bear Jew and just say there were and are strong Jews. And I love that. So I want to give it a 3.5, but nitty gritty, there's obviously a lot more in this film beyond some of the Jewish characters that's more, steeped in the war itself. So that's why I'm not going higher than that. But 3.5 would be my score. How do you weigh in on that, Daniel?
Ooh, isn't that the question of the night? No, not really. No,
I've all been waiting.
I feel like I could either go, I feel like I'm probably in the same ballpark, but I think, to recap a lot of what everyone else had so brilliantly said in a much less eloquent way, I'd say, the characters, some of my rubric, in addition to the show rubric, is like, did we have any Hebrew? Did we have any davening? Did we have any kippahs? None of that, right? So like on paper, in the movie, like there's no portrayal of people being Jewish. Shoshana is Jewish, but she goes most of the movie by Emmanuel Mimieux. She assumes this sort of French identity. The characters, the bastards themselves, they're not doing anything Jewish. They just happen to be Jewish. Obviously, the framing of it being in World War II, the Nazi aspect of it, that it's like Jewish sort of, but it's not. It's not. It's a World War II film that Tarantino has set. It's like revenge porn. It's he like you said earlier, Harry. He has these genres that he tackles, whether it's like Django Unchained, where it's like slavery, fantasy, revenge porn kind of, and then he'll do kung fu movies with Kill Bill, and then he'll do his what was that, Death Proof, and his other like horror film, and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. All of his movies are very genre specific films, and this is his attempt at a very good attempt at a World War II film that happens to have Jewish characters and kind of like takes the normal Gentile spin of like the Magnificent Seven or those kinds, Dirty Dozen, those movies where everyone's kind of, a Gentile, but adding the Jewish flavor to it. I think, it's seasoned Jewish, I'll say. And Shoshana is a very strong Jewish female character, and she's ultimately, I feel like, the hero of the film, more so, Jodi, like you had said, that she's much more effective and elegant in her way of like sticking it to the Nazis. I think she's, honestly, she comes across as much smarter than Aldo Rain. So she is a very strong female Jewish lead, which is awesome. The bastards are very dumb. I'm ranting. apologize. I'll get to my rating, but essentially I'm going to go around like 3.25. That's sort of my thought. I mean, I think it's a great picture for the Jews. They all come across as like very smart, very tough, and folks who can get shit done.
I just think the point you're bringing up about Django Unchained and Death Proof and Kill Bill, which I would all classify as revenge films. Like you look at them, their stories are all built around revenge. I think the one thing that strikes me, a year later, Django Unchained comes out, and unlike in this film, clearly the main character is an African American man, and the story is told from his perspective. And unlike in this film, where even though we get Shoshana, she is not the most captivating characters. I would even say Hans Landa might be the main character, if not, Aldo.
Sure.
And I just wonder that question about the Jews. And you say, we ask questions, is this good for the Jews? So this is a very violent movie. It has most of its fame is around its violence. And I keep on wondering to myself about the nature of violence and nature of what is the association of Jews as either completely non-violent and helpless, or so violent that they'll even blow themselves up to, destroy Hitler. And we get that scene with Donnie and the other guy, like literally standing over Hitler's body, like pelting it with bullets as it pops up and down.
Right.
I think the thing you pointed out about Shoshana and literally her last words, she's dead already. This is a posthumous, like saying it's actually not even on screen. The screen is burned down. The clouds from the fire, is now being projected, her face on it. And I think it's Tarantino's way of saying, and I will claim this, that our greatest thing as Jews to have is not our ability to shoot guns at Hitler or made up, claymation Hitler. It's our ability to make movies, to tell the stories where we win. And in some ways, why this movie is great for the Jews is not because of the violence. I felt it. When I went to the theater with 7 of my friends wearing kippahs in the theater, I felt it when they were shooting Hitler. Like it was a visceral feeling. But rewatching this, I realized like Shoshana being projected like that and her voice and saying, I am Shoshana Dreyfus. This is Jewish vengeance. To me, that is what's good for the Jews. It's Tarantino reminding all of us Jews out there that we got to make movies where we reclaim our stories.
So that was our review of Inglourious Basterds. Jodi and Yechiel, thank you so much. You both host a podcast. Tell us about that.
We do. We host Two Movie Jews, and it grew out of the realization that every time Yechiel and I were together, all we did was talk about movies. The rabbi who went to film school and the Jewish communal professional who only, keeps track of how many movies she sees in a year and writes an Oscar blog and is obsessed with movies. And so we said, let's give this a try. And every week we pick, or every other week, we pick a theme. We often do movie challenges. We challenge each other to see a movie. Our very first episode, to go way back to the very beginning, was the movies that made us love movies. We've done genres. We did the entire Marvel universe, in which we watched 22 Marvel movies. At the time, that's how many there were. We watched all the Pixar movies and did a genre there. We always try to connect it in some way to like what's Jewish about it, if we can find it. And it's just it's a fun exploration of film. And we have a lot of, as you can probably gather, a lot of very witty banter. So it's a fun listen. And I will say, even where I work at a synagogue, and our synagogue president is the biggest Two Movie Jews fans, and has now taken to texting me on Fridays to say, what am I watching this weekend? So we have a good time, don't we, Yechiel?
We do, and I think that's the best thing is like, I grew up going to yeshiva where like you really try to find someone who can be your banter and Talmudic, stuff. And we mentioned the Talmud earlier. To me, movies are my Talmud. Like in every way, the way that like they connect to our lives, they connect to other texts, which books or movies or life. And just when you find someone that you love to talk about it with, why not make that a podcast so other people can enjoy? And we just want to inspire other people to, talk about movies and to love movies and not just to treat them as something, that's not worth talking about, but to treat them like something worth talking about.
Yeah. Awesome. So the podcast is called Two Movie Jews, and where can people check it out?
It's on all the major Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher. We're on all the places you listen to podcasts.
Fantastic.
I mean, listen, I challenge anyone, maybe except for Jews on Film, to find another podcast where they're talking about Star Wars with the Yetzer HaTov and Yetzer Hara, the good inclination and bad inclination. So, we find a Jewish reference wherever we can.
Well, the force is strong with you two for sure. Jodi and Yechiel, thank you so much for being here on Jews on Film to discuss Inglourious Basterds. Anything to plug besides your podcast?
During Oscar season, I write an Oscar blog called Berman Oscar Blog, and I see every single nominated film every year, and I put up a little summary and a review, and really I focus on, like, if you only see 3 movies this year from the Oscar nominees, see this one, and then I pick a hidden gem. So, Oscar season, check out Berman Oscar Blog.
Fantastic. Yechiel, anything on your calendar or anything you want to plug?
No, just go see lots of movies, ideally in theaters.
Yay.
Amazing. Harry, we got to know, what are you cooking this week? What do you want to plug? What kind of recipes can you share with our audience?
I wish I was more prepared for this. I know you ask it every episode, but
come on, man. You had the Zoom calendar invite. You knew this was happening.
We're recording this early in the week. I haven't figured it out yet, but maybe we'll open the next episode. I'll let you know exactly what it was. Maybe
we can edit this in post. But usually, just for those who are new to the pod, Harry and his wife Jess are amazing cooks, and so each week, each weekend on Shabbat, when I see him in synagogue, I always ask him like what he cooked, because he tells me, he regales me with these recipes like honey covered schnitzels and short ribs and sous vide this and whatever. So I want to like paint a picture here on this audio medium and ask, Harry what he's cooking, but
it'll be our spin-off.
I think that's a
our
new
spin-off
podcast.
We'll all be about food.
Exactly. What's Harry cooking?
Exactly.
Jews on Food. Love it. Well, we also have to do Jews on Broadway, apparently.
Oh, there is one out there. Nita Silver does a Jews on Broadway.
Oh, perfect. Then we're good. We don't have to do it.
It's a relief.
Amazing. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here. And as always, follow us on Jews on Film on Instagram, on TikTok, and find us wherever podcasts are found. And have a great evening. Auf Wiedersehen.
Jews on Film is hosted and produced by Daniel Zana and Harry Ottensaucer.
Harry Ottensaucer edited this episode.
Make sure to follow us on Instagram at Jews on Film and subscribe to our podcast to get new episodes. Thanks for listening.